Hi everyone, this is Matt Foster, and today I'm going to walk you through how assessment and explicit instruction can make English language learners proficient readers. First, I want to show you my why. I want to start with a student who completely changed how I think about English language learners and literacy in general. His name is Diego. Diego came to the elementary school that I worked at from Honduras when he was in the 4th grade. When he arrived, he spoke essentially no English. At the time, I was teaching 4th grade, and because I spoke enough Spanish to get by, he was placed in my classroom. Diego was not behind academically in Honduras. He was very curious, social, and highly motivated. But the moment he entered my classroom, he was placed into an English-only instructional environment. Directions were given verbally, and reading instructions assumed familiarity with English sounds and sentence structures. Classroom discussions moved quickly, and Diego was trying to learn content, language, and reading all at the same time. Looking back, I realized that Diego wasn't struggling because he lacked ability. He was struggling because instruction assumed a foundation that he didn't yet have. In this class, I have understood what happened beneath the surface and why students like Diego often appear to struggle long before we fully understand their needs. One of the most important realizations from this course is that learning English and learning to read in English are not separate processes. They happen at the same time, and they place an enormous cognitive load on students. Diego wasn't just decoding texts, he was trying to make meaning in a language that was still unfamiliar to him. This class helped me understand that oral language development plays a major role here. According to Hartford and Vaughan, when instruction relies heavily on explanation, discussion, and independent reading, English language learners can easily fall behind, even when they are capable learners. Exposure alone doesn't guarantee understanding. Without intentional support, students can end up guessing, relying on peers, or even disengaging. This is where many English language learners are misunderstood. Their struggles are often seen as academic, when actually they're linguistic. That distinction matters because it determines how we respond instructionally. Many students who struggle with reading are taught to rely on strategies like guesswork from pictures, context, or first letters rather than learning how to decode words accurately. Investigative reporting by APM reports has shown that this approach, often referred to as 3-cueing, can give the appearance that students are reading while masking underlying decoding weaknesses. Emily Hanford explains that when students are not taught to rely primarily on the alphabetic principle, they are less likely to develop automatic word recognition, which can slow vocabulary growth and comprehension over time. This research highlights why explicit symptomatic phonics instruction is critical, especially for students with learning disabilities and multilingual learners. In the 3rd module, we focused on oral language, and Chapter 6 broke down language into 3 components: content, form, and use. This framework completely reshaped how I think about literacy instruction for English language learners. For Diego, language content meant vocabulary. He didn't have the academic or conversational vocabulary needed to follow directions and instruction. Language form meant sentence structure and sound patterns, many of which were different from Spanish. Language use meant knowing how to participate in classroom discussions, ask questions, and demonstrate understanding. Expecting fluent reading without addressing these components wasn't really realistic. Oral language is the foundation on which literacy is built. If that foundation is weak or is still developing, reading instruction has to account for it. Otherwise, students are set up to struggle. You'll see in this slide how important phonetic awareness is, and we'll come back to this later as we understand that before you can get to oral language, you have to build knowledge, vocabulary, and the most foundational part, phonetic awareness. One of the most practical takeaways from our third module is the oral language assessment doesn't have to be formal or complicated to be meaningful. It starts with intentional listening. How does a student pronounce sounds, and which sounds are substituted or which sounds are omitted? Are errors consistent or inconsistent? When I think back to my student Diego, I realize how much information I could have gathered just by observing how he spoke and how he interacted. Which words did he avoid? Which sounds caused hesitation? These informal data points matter because they tell us where instruction needs to start. Vaughan reinforces that assessment should guide instruction, not just label students. Oral language assessment gives us insight into what students can do and what they are still developing, which is essential for English language learners. Oral language assessment does not have to be formal or complicated to be meaningful. Module 3 also emphasized phonology as part of oral language, and this was a major shift in my thinking. Diego wasn't just learning new words, he was learning new sounds. Some English phonemes, as we'll see, don't exist exactly in Latin American Spanish, which makes them difficult to hear and even harder to produce. The Lee et al. Article explains this clearly. Emergent bilingual students with reading difficulties often struggle with phoneme discrimination. If students can't reliably distinguish sounds, decoding becomes guesswork. That struggle often looks like a reading problem, but it's actually a language-based issue. This matters because without assessing phoneme discrimination, teachers may assume students just need more reading practice. In reality, they need targeted instruction that helps them hear and produce sounds accurately. Language difference versus learning difficulties. One of the most important responsibilities educators have in distinguishing between language difference and disability. Vaughan emphasizes this point that English language learners may struggle due to language acquisition, but that doesn't automatically mean that they have a learning disability. At the same time, being an English language learner does not mean that a disability can't exist. Assessment helps us avoid over-identification as well as under-identification. For Diego, his struggles were rooted in language acquisition, not disability. But without careful assessment, it would have been easy to misinterpret his needs. Instructional decisions depend on getting this distinction right. Once again, it's important that we get it right because if we misidentify it, we are not doing anything to actually build the foundation that we need for reading comprehension. We also focused on how instruction should respond once assessment identifies gaps. The APM reports reading explains the consequences of instruction that relies on guessing or context clues. These approaches may make students successful early on, but they don't actually build decoding skills. For English language learners, guessing is especially harmful. It may allow them to get through simple texts, but it doesn't support pronunciation, spelling, or long-term fluency. Explicit instruction removes ambiguity. Students are shown exactly how sounds work and how letters represent those sounds. Here's the word imported broken into phonemes with 7 sounds, graphemes represented by the letters and combinations of letters, and morphemes made up of 3 meaningful word parts. This is a very good exercise for students who are learning how to read, whether they're learning to read English and don't speak it, or whether they already speak English and are learning new words. The Novelli-Seg article provides a concrete instructional response through sound walls. Sound walls organize words, and they do this by phonemes rather than spelling patterns. They help students connect how sounds are produced to how they are written. For English language learners, sound walls make phonics visible and they make them tangible. Students can see, feel, and hear how sounds work. This supports decoding, spelling, and pronunciation all at the same time. Sound walls align perfectly with oral language because they allow instruction to target specific phonological gaps during assessment. Again, sound walls are not the same as word walls. Word walls are already alphabetical list of words with sight words and other important content, and while they help improve vocabulary and spelling, they do not break words down into phonemes. Sound walls do break words down into phonemes with the same phoneme pattern, and they help develop phonological awareness. Heart words fit naturally into this framework as well. Heart words are high-frequency words that students can't fully decode yet, but they need to recognize automatically. For English language learners, these words often appear before all phonics patterns are fully mastered. Teaching heart words is not memorization for its own sake. Students learn which parts of a word can be decoded and which parts must be remembered. This helps to prevent guessing and supports accuracy. Heart words give students access to text while foundational skills are still being developed. This comes to us from the Wexler et al. Critical reading routine. And this particular chart I selected because I was actually fascinated with the word was. It's a very simple word, W-A-S, and yet it has 2 sounds which are heart letters. You may fully understand for the W sound, but when you read the letter A, you have to memorize that it makes a sound, and the S doesn't make a S sound, but it makes a Z sound. Once you memorize the A and the S in terms of the sounds, you can break it down into W, Z, was. Another thing that English language learners often struggle with, particularly if they are from Latin America, is the soft th and the hard th sounds. The soft th is unvoiced. For example, think, 3, through, thumb, or even Thursday. The hard th is voiced. This, these, them, breathe. That sound rarely exists in Spanish. In Spain, you hear it more in words like corazón or cenar, but you don't hear it in Latin American Spanish. That is a phoneme which is foreign to them. In Latin American Spanish, the word corazón would be corazón, which would be heart, and cenar would be cenar, which is to cook. So the th sound in English, whether it be a soft th or a hard th, is a foreign one to Latin American speakers, and that is something they must really practice when they learn American English. Here we have those listed as heart words, and I put the hearts underneath both of these in th, I, k, k, and also the, I, s. We have to break them up, and the way that you pronounce th, I, n, k, or the, I, s, you have to memorize the first part by heart. So now let's talk about the missing piece, comprehension in middle school. This is where we get to our 7th module and where my thinking really came full circle. Even when students learn to decode accurately, that doesn't automatically mean that they comprehend complex text, especially in the middle school content arena. Wexler et al. Point out that many struggling readers, including English language learners, are expected to independently comprehend grade level text without being taught exactly how to do that. Just like decoding, comprehension requires explicit instruction. And why comprehension fails without structure? Well, Wexler explains that comprehension often breaks down because students lack background knowledge, academic language, and also strategies for interacting with the text. For English language learners, this is compounded by language demands. What stood out to me is that comprehension instruction often assumes that students already know how to extract meaning, but Wexler challenges that assumption and argues for structured outlines that make thinking highly visible. In the critical reading routine described by Wexler, it's very powerful because it mirrors what we've already seen in earlier modules, with it being explicit, structured, and scaffolded. Students are guided through vocabulary, text analysis, and they're also making meaning step by step. So how do you connect all three of these together? Well, originally, we learned how to assess oral language and phonology, and then we were given tools to teach decoding and word recognition explicitly. And finally, we've been shown how to support comprehension once students can access the test. For English language learners, this progression is of high importance. If we skip any step, it creates gaps that show up later. And often by that time, the student is already in middle school, and it makes it exponentially harder. So why does this all matter now? In classrooms today, English language learners are often over-accommodated and under-taught. This class has pushed back on that. We're reminded that language learners don't need less instruction, they need better instruction. They need instruction that's grounded in assessment and delivered explicitly, as Vaughan, Boss, and Shum point out. So let's revisit Diego here. Diego's success didn't come from exposure alone. It came from developing language, literacy, and comprehension over time, and not just in my class, but in his 5th grade class, in his classes in middle school, high school, and beyond. What Wexler describes is exactly what students like Diego need once decoding is no longer the barrier. Diego finished 4th grade with me, and as I said, he went on to 5th, went on to middle school, but I kept up with him over the years, and his spoken English improved. His reading comprehension improved. From middle school and on to high school, He had several outstanding teachers in the ESOL program, as well as content areas, who recognized his strengths as well as his challenges and adapted to his needs. He continued working hard, and he graduated high school with honors. He now speaks fluent English and Spanish and plays professional soccer. And I was so proud of him then, and I'm so proud of him now, and the progress that he has made every step of the way.